Today we're going to be talking about the opportunities and challenges for Hispanic Republicans in Texas. And there are a good deal of both, so we're going to be covering all around today. But first, I want to thank our sponsors, Brown and Ortiz, and the Liberty Bar Grill, or no, the Liberty Bar Convent, where we are. And I also want to let our non-subscribers in the audience know that we actually, you can sign up for a subscription today at the back table to see Elaine, Wolff, my partner over there, and we can get you taken care of. All right, now I'd like to quickly introduce the panelists. This is, at the end here, we've got Representative John Garza. He's an ordained minister, correct?
Yes, I am.
Great. Sells houses for a living, and he is a Republican who upset David Leibowitz, three-term incumbent David Leibowitz in last year's general election. Shocked political circles throughout the region. And he just finished up his first session. First few sessions, actually.
Yes.
If you include the specials. Right, next we've got Rolando Pablos. He's a very busy local attorney. But more than that, he's a former chairman of the Texas Racing Commission, and is currently a member of the Public Utilities Commission. So it's a pretty high-powered gig. And he's also a friend of Rick Perez. And we will go into that in a little bit. Here we've got campaign consultant Leonard Rodriguez. And actually, I'm going to let Leonard tell you a little bit about what he's done.
Just real quickly, I'm a former White House Associate Director for the Office of Political Affairs under President Bush's first term. Served there for 4 years and oversaw the Southwest, Midwest, and Western states for the political operation. And also served as the National Hispanic Director for President Bush's first campaign and advisor to him on his second campaign, and was part of the media team for McCain in the 2008 elections, and currently run a consulting company that helps companies use political management and tactics for achieving their corporate goals.
Quite a bit. So, here are the ground rules. For the first half an hour or so, we might make it a little less because we're starting a bit late. I will kind of lead the discussion with a few questions of the panelists. Each member will address, have their chance to address the question. And then we're going to open it up to the floor for questions. My partner at Plaza, Armas, Elaine, Wolff, will hand around the microphone. And hey, could you hand us that mic over there? We'll start with Representative Garza. And so, okay, so you've always been Hispanic. That's true. But have you always been, presumably, but have you always been a Republican? Tell us something about how you evolved as politically.
My evolution politically wise, I guess, was in high school in the early mid-70s. There was a huge movement for La Raza, or Chicano power. I was involved in the Edgewood School District as far as with the education Title X legislation was happening, or the lawsuits, and everything was happening then. So that was more of a political awakening from my roots in the West Side. Later on in college, pretty much was apolitical, and starting my career in family, pretty much was not involved in politics. I think probably having children, starting to own property, purchasing homes, achieving some wealth, having 5 children, sending them to school, starting neighborhoods and rooftops and building communities. Business-wise, I began to become more sensitive to how politics impacted my life personally. Coming up as an evangelical, more of the movements evangelically began to impress on me certain things that were happening politically that were not necessarily positive and good for business, for families, for marriage, and some of the things that I began to stand for. And so that's really where I came into my awareness and leadership training, and in both the church and both in the private sector, began to become more aware of how we influence the people around us, what our influence as we begin to gain a position of leadership within the community, within business, how we impact others, and what our responsibilities are. So in a nutshell, I mean, it sort of metamorphosed into an awareness of who I was, and I, at that point, began to register as a Republican and vote regularly.
Well, you ran, you first ran against David Leibowitz in 2008. If I'm not mistaken, that's the first time you ran for office, right?
Exactly.
Okay. What kind of support do you feel like you got from the party apparatus, when you decided you wanted to seek office? Any at all?
Well, I mean, I'm a marketing guy, so I began to network, and I found in Bexar County the awareness of conservative leadership outside the normal boundaries. Alamo Heights, the judges' races, maybe Frank Court at the time had district, the far north district. I had more reception and more awareness and more curiosity in Austin with the different stakeholders, so I concentrated more in getting advice and leadership.
Who were some of those stakeholders?
More of the conservative. I remember back then, talking to the Patriot Group. I think Anthony Hollum used to teach over at UTSA. Some of the different groups, lobby groups, were of interest of who I was and what I was doing. So a lot of times the Texas Lobby Group, Mike Tumay, some of those people, David Barton, wall builders, more on the evangelical side, pretty much were trying to direct me in what I could do. I came up through actually a movement by Governor Perry, or I was noticed by a movement by Governor Perry called Confia, and that was essentially trying to engage Hispanic pastors in the south and west parts of San Antonio, as well as all Dallas and the other cities. So I actually went up to Austin for several conferences and seminars. And
did you get any kind of encouragement at all from the party, or any emissaries from the party?
I guess, there's encouragement in saying, hey, go out there, do what you can. Here's 3 or 4 things you can do. But as far as organizing leadership or support groups, I remember I had an initial meeting with a kitchen cabinet group that called me, Cindy Cryer and some of the more established leadership. I was green, wet behind the ears, so I mean they weren't really impressed with me. The doors kind of shut there, so I pretty much had to do everything on my own from there.
All right, we'll hand it off to Rolando now. So how about you? Always a Republican or no?
Always Hispanic.
Right. You sure? Okay.
Always conservative. I was born and raised in Mexico to a very conservative family. My parents are very conservative.
Where did you grow up in Mexico?
I grew up in Ciudad Juarez, and when I was 10 years old, we moved to El Paso, Texas. And again, the conservative values travel with us. And when growing up, my parents were entrepreneurs. I grew up with an entrepreneurial spirit. And I've always felt that the Republican Party had those same values, and so feeling that we had that same overlap of values, I felt more at home with the Republican Party.
How did your parents vote?
I'm sorry?
How did your parents vote?
My parents...
Did they identify as Republicans or Democrats?
My parents identify themselves as Republican. Yes.
Was there anybody to run or vote for?
There was absolutely no one in El Paso.
Vote for it. El Paso, yeah, because that would have been, 30 years ago?
Yeah, absolutely.
So at any point did you ever identify yourself as a Democrat, or was it always, you went into, graduated from high school, entered college as a Republican?
Well, no, I've never identified myself as a Democrat, and I think a lot of it had to do with growing up. When Ronald Reagan stepped into office, I was 13, 14 years old. I was at an impressionable age, and so I always felt that, that Ronald Reagan era really defined, where I wanted to be.
Mm-hmm. Well, tell me how you got to know Rick Perry, and then how that, influenced your appointment to the Racing Commission.
Well, like the representative, I've always felt like I've had a certain level of support from the Republican Party, not only local but statewide. Folks like General Abbott, Susan Combs, you know, at the statewide level, Nancy Villarreal, the Latino part of the Republican Party has always been very supportive. They've always encouraged me to run for office at one point or another. But in the last few years, the governor has asked me to help out in certain key roles. I participated at the Nueces River Authority, sat on the board of directors there. I also participated in the Property Appraisal Task Force, which the governor set up a few years ago. We went around the state simply evaluating the property appraisal process. And you know, about 4 years ago, he asked me to step into the Texas Racing Commission. I have a background in gaming. I have a master's degree in hotel restaurant management, and in that I specialized in gaming. I'd worked for a gaming company, and so it seemed to be a perfect fit, and it was. I served up until July, and just recently he asked me to step into the Public Utility Commission, where we regulate electric utilities and telecom utilities as well.
Now, have you played any kind of role in Rick Perry's presidential campaign?
No, other than being extremely supportive, helping fundraising, but my focus has been with the team that stayed back to hold the fort down over at the PUC.
Well, let me put it on the spot a little bit. What does Perry have to do to keep his campaign viable? Because it doesn't look especially viable right now.
Well, I disagree. I think it's quite viable, and you know, I think.
What's that?
I'm sorry?
Oh, no, go.
Yeah, no, I think his campaign is very viable. You know, the governor himself has admitted he's not a very good debater, but you know, I think it was a very good strategy to focus him in those early days on fundraising. I mean, he raised $18 million. He was fundraising the days of these debates, you know, the afternoons of the debates, so he was out there. He might not have been focused on prepping for the debates. I think this recent hiccup, you know, had it been standalone, it might not have been such a big deal. But, you know, I would never write him off. I think he's coming into his own, particularly in Iowa. And people will begin to see who he really is without the bias of the media, I think, you know. So he'll be out there getting to know people. He had a really good showing yesterday at the Family Values Conference. And so for all the years I've known him to be a fighter, and I think there's more still to come from him.
Okay, great. All right, Wonder, you want to tell us how you, if you want to talk about how your work for Republican politicians evolved, that would be great. Or if you want to be a little personal, by all means.
I was primarily raised out of a, you know, San Antonio Democrat family. My family's been here for ages, so they were part of that Democrat sweep that came through and grabbed a lot of the Mexican Americans. Up until college, I would say that probably my philosophies were conservative, but at the same time very liberal in interpretation of what is just and what is law from a religious standpoint. So things like social justice, those type of wordings played into the development. But I was primarily apolitical. I was not active. I just remember my roommate was for Reagan and I was for Clinton. He had his sign on his side of the room and I had mine, I guess, to have mine on my side of the room. My first transformation was really a matter of opportunity, being groomed into the Democrat establishment political system here. The first thing I noticed about 1998, 99 was that it was an extremely long line if you were a Mexican American wanting to get involved in Democrat politics. And I think that's still true. If that's your intention, get in line, and it's a long line. Fortunately enough for me, I had also published in 1999 a volume work called Celebrating Outstanding Hispanics, 500 Years of Latino Pride. And the purpose of that was to put together over 300 profiles that accomplished that profiled the accomplishments of different Hispanics here in the U.S. Going back 500 years in time, early history, and into current congressmen. Well, it was that particular venture that got the attention of some Republican operatives, and I happened to be at the right place at the right time doing the right thing, and was asked to then lead President Bush's Hispanic effort, beginning with the straw poll in Iowa, and had continued working in Republican politics through the White House. And so I would say now I'm kind of in my third transformation of not really, actually looking at Republican and Democrat politics as being two sides of the same coin. And that's probably just because I've had the opportunity to make the Kool-Aid, mix the Kool-Aid, sell the Kool-Aid, drink the Kool-Aid, then come out of that bubble and realize what the Kool-Aid is. And so I would say at this point it would be an independent Republican, a far more independent person.
I'd like to ask you, given your involvement in George Bush's campaigns, right? So he won, I think it was north of 40% of the Hispanic vote in 2004. Right? So 4 years later, John McCain polled something far closer to 30%. I think it was like 31%. What happened between 2004 and 2008? Was it simply a matter of the tone of the immigration debate in Congress, or was there more to it than that?
You have to remember that there's a lot more to it than the tone of the immigration debate, and it had to do with 9/11. If you remember, prior up to 9/11, the president had done some really remarkable things in changing the policy and history by which the White House and the United States operate. The first was his first foreign trip, I believe, was actually into Mexico as opposed to Canada. And that had been something that had never been done before. The second thing that he had done was hosted Mexico State dinner at the White House, when in fact that was always supposed to be Canada's thing as well. So leading up into 9/11, you'll have to remember that there was he was leading from his campaign on what he said he was going to do with immigration. After 9/11, the focus of the U.S. changed. There was no more domestic policy. Up until 9/11, I would say our offices had 85% of the president's time. After 9/11, we had probably 15 to 10%, and the rest of his work really became FBI, CIA, Department of Homeland Security. These things took precedence over the domestic agenda that the president had laid out. And that transformation of government and operation did set up this immigration issue that we're dealing with that was different before 9/11, and now something completely else, after 9/11. And then you add to it the immigration rhetoric did not help, and by the time I think Bush got back onto immigration, he had lost a lot of support from that very conservative base, and it was too much to put together. John McCain, on the other hand, he waited way too long to get his Hispanic organization together. He was the perfect candidate to help bring back Hispanics into the fold, seeing how he vigorously defended at that time a lot of his positions on immigration. He was an immigration champion. He'd received all the honors from the major Democrat organizations, NCLR, LULAC. They liked John McCain, but it was too little too late. And that's probably the biggest fault that I see with Republican politics at the national level, statewide level, and local level.
Back to John. All right, so after the 2008 general elections, there were no Hispanic Republicans in the legislature, either in the Texas House or the Texas Senate. After the 2010 elections, you had 5 Hispanics in one office in the Texas House, and then shortly after the election, Aaron Pena of Edinburgh switched parties, so he went from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party. What do you think happened, generally speaking, in that 2-year period? And then, is there anything that happened at the party level to to make that happen?
I think probably there's a gentleman on my staff, Mike Rolando, who sort of says it probably more articulately than anyone, is that we are an emerging species. Some would prefer that we be stabbed back into the pond or something, but I just think, you know, from my perspective in San Antonio, from West Bexar County, South Bexar County, in 2010, what we noticed differently is there was a lot of division within the Democratic Party. Walking the blocks and talking to the folks, I think a lot of the loyal Democrats or independents, swing voters, really felt that the Democrats had reneged on quite a few of their promises. Not being a Democrat, I wasn't sure what those were. So we found that we could disengage those folks by talking about positive things. And I think that was Texas-wide, is talking about pro-family values, entrepreneurship that Rolando hit so hard on. I think as a people, we have that spirit of wanting to start our own business, be our own bosses, not have a lot of oversight and regulation. Also the dream of home ownership, which I'm involved, it's getting much more difficult for families to keep their homes with spiraling expenses and taxes. So the nuts and bolts of 2010, you know, being the economy, more so jobs going out of 2010, I think are extremely important. I think we articulated immigration in our district very intelligently. So I think the Republican Party has a natural tendency to attract Hispanics. I just think as a party, we need to be more inclusive to that right.
Well, first of all, I'd like to go back. What do you mean by within District 117, which is your district? When you say voters think about immigration more intelligently or constructively, what do you mean?
No, I didn't say that. I said I think we presented the immigration issue more reasonably and intelligently for people to grasp. So no, immigration really in my district wasn't a huge issue. Mm-hmm. So we didn't even address it as one of our major core platforms.
During your campaign?
During both campaigns.
Right. Now, look, you know, kind of projecting ahead into the 2011 session, though, you had, you know, voter ID, which critics say, you know, it has the effect of suppressing, minority turnout among voters. And you also had Rick Perry declaring as emergency legislation anti-sanctuary city measures, which, I mean, you know, just in case there's anybody out there who doesn't know, that's basically the governor wanted to outlaw or prevent cities from directing their police departments from, directing them to not uphold federal immigration law. Now, what kind of effect did that have on Hispanics in your district? I mean, they saw all that, and what did they make of it?
I think I have Art Martinez here, who's also a Hispanic office holder. He's the mayor of Army, and I think he'll agree with me that we really didn't get a lot of pushback on the state's position on immigration. We had a lot of support of our legislation on immigration. In fact, we had a lot of groups,
Could you describe that?
Excuse me?
Could you describe your?
HCR 88, and then in the special session was HCR 13. And what it essentially was is stating that it's not the state's responsibility unless the federal government wants to sanction us with that authority. We were asking the federal government to basically fix immigration. We did not take an amnesty position on it, but we took a basic theory that we needed to deal with immigration as an economic opportunity to document workers in the United States. And from there, we could deal more reasonably and deal more realistically with the security issues. So you're able to look that up at the State House, but it just deals with reasonable expectations for our current workforce. I mean, we're talking to ranchers, we're talking to farmers, we're talking to business owners here in San Antonio and throughout major cities in San Antonio, even to this week, that are trying to find bodies to work in their businesses, and are having an extremely difficult time in doing that. And I think the Republican Party speaks more to enabling the population and not disabling. We talk less about entitlements and more about we have the responsibility and we are entitled to lift people up, encourage them, get the private sector involved in more solutions, whether it be education, immigration. So, I think we talk something that is beginning to make more sense to our people, to our population. It's not about entitlement, it's not about that anymore, because that's actually disabling our communities, where we want to lift up our communities, lift up our folks. There are plenty of jobs, so we want to talk more about bringing more training programs into our districts, reducing the dropout rates by having more vocational training that puts workers directly out into $40,000, $50,000 a year jobs that are available within 20 to 40 minutes of San Antonio. And those type of things will immediately impact our community in the south and west parts of San Antonio, where my counterparts just want to talk about where's the money, how much more money can we get, how come we're not getting money. So I think we're talking more reasonably and sensibly as a party. Even the idea, I mean, we think people should be responsible enough. I got stopped. Susan saw me have a fender bender right here on Alamo Street. I had my license, I had my insurance, I had all my identification. My insurance rates are going up, but surely enough, there was 3 of us involved and one in the middle.
She didn't cause it, right?
She didn't cost it. I cost it.
I'm standing on the side.
But, I think all of us are responsible as citizens or even guests in this country to have proper documentation. When I travel to Switzerland and France and I'm driving, I know at the checkpoint I've got to have my passport, have all my documentation. Why would it be any different here in Texas or in the United States? The fact that sanctuary cities prohibited cities from having official policies telling their law enforcement officers not to enforce immigration is the law. So I didn't see any danger in Governor Perry's legislation. It just stated the obvious, it's against the law. But he had a hammer in that if you did that, then certain state monies wouldn't be coming to you. And Lord knows we see the federal government doing that right now in the state of Texas by excessive intrusion even into right now our redistricting process and in our legislation, which it's our sovereign right to set our laws in the state of Texas.
Good. All right, so Rolando, between 2008 and 2010, what happened? As far as the number of elected Hispanic Republicans.
Well,
I got a little far afield, but we're coming back. So.
Well, look, I think just the fact that we had individuals who were willing to step up to the plate and run for office, I think was a great step forward. I have a very unique honor, and that is that I sit both on the Associated Republicans of Texas and the Hispanic Republicans of Texas Boards of Directors. And, our conversations are based on that exactly is, the recruiting of qualified individuals to run for office who just happen to be Hispanic is really what we're trying to do. In this situation, I think, had we not had Hispanics there, we would have, pretty much set ourselves back. And so with individuals like the representative here who have, really stuck their necks out and gotten out there, as candidates, I think is a great step forward. What's happening is, the way I see the whole, Hispanic Republican recruitment effort, I see it as a turf war. I think everybody recognizes that the Latino community is a strong community that will make a difference or is already making a difference in electoral politics. And this is a Pepsi versus Coke situation where, You know, as Republicans, we're trying to enter the market. We're trying to become attractive to not only the Hispanic candidates, but also to the voting public. Some of the policies and some of the issues that are out there are not attractive to the Latinos. But folks like us who are spearheading this, we have to have thick skin, and we have to recognize that, you know, we're not always going to agree with everyone in our party, but at the end of the day, we share one thing, and that is our values. And so if we focus on the values of the Hispanic community and the values of the Republican Party, I think you will agree with me that they're very similar. And so this isn't going to be an overnight situation. This is going to take a long time. This is cross-generational. When we look at candidates and individuals to recruit, you know, we're trying to develop a bench so that we can have individuals who have educated themselves, who trained themselves, people who want to do that as well. And so we're really encouraged by the fact that a lot of the Latino community identifies itself as conservative. And so our goal now is to ensure that even though we have issues like immigration, sanctuary cities and all that, that isn't necessarily attractive, that they also consider the fact that those values are really the cornerstone of the party, and that's really what we ought to look towards to bring us together. You know, I think it's so much better to use the values to bring us together than to look at certain key issues to divide us.
Okay, great. Now, are you looking at it to the next legislative session in 2013? Are you at all worried that if something like sanctuary cities makes a return, or another kind of spate of immigration reform bills, are you worried about any kind of long-term damage that could do between Texas Republican Party and Hispanic voters, potentially, Hispanic Republican voters?
Well, like I said, I mean, these issues are divisive issues. I mean, they're going to be very difficult, and frankly, I don't think there's any correct answer out there. They will alienate some folks, but again, I'm looking towards achieving some type of parity with respect to the values issue. I think that as we go out there and recruit voters and recruit candidates, we push on the value side of things and hope that they understand that there will be issues that we'll never agree on. But at the same time, if we're going to make a place for ourselves within the Republican Party, we need to start somewhere, and so that's what we're trying to do.
All right, Leonard, so what do you think was behind the pickup in 2010 of Hispanic Republicans in the legislature?
Three things. The first was, you got to remember, and I give a lot of credit to President Bush and what he was able to do while he was in office. Prior to President Bush being in office, you have to remember that the Hispanic constituency was politically labeled a lean Democrat constituency. Okay. When he came into office, it was about the same thing. It was basically coming off of a very anti-immigrant rhetoric that Pete Wilson and the Republican Party was vacillating. And he came out and said, no, I'm a different kind of Republican. Here's what Hispanics mean. Here's what Mexican Americans bring. Very different language. That opened it up, and he spent more money, had more Hispanics in his than anything else. And so part of the success that we've had in having more Hispanics at the congressional level and at the statewide level are a result of moving the constituency literally from a lean Democrat to swing. At this point, when the Hispanic constituency is now considered a swing constituency, more Republicans felt more assured running from that standpoint. That's the first thing. The second thing is, if you want to look at the state of Hispanic affairs and cast any blame, okay, I would cast the majority of the blame on the Hispanic Democrats. They've They have held 60% of the Hispanic voting bloc as a population. And so if you look at legislatively where we are and why we aren't further, I would lay blame at all the Hispanic Democrat patrons who have been controlling the majority of the U.S. cities, including South Texas. And the third thing is the work that both Rolando and State Rep Garza, or Senator, right? Senator, have been doing. One is having the courage just to run. And on his own, and finding that willpower to get out there and say, I'm going to do it. That in and of itself is half of it. And the other piece to it, and these things go hand in hand, is the work that Hispanic Republican groups are doing collectively to continue to identify qualified candidates and message to them, and helping them understand, I guess, that on both sides of the coin, we need to have participation and representation. And so now's that time, and it seems to there's an opportunity for it. So.
Great. All right, now, Hispanics now make up about 51% of students in public schools in Texas. And in order to balance the budget in the last session, the Republican-controlled legislature cut hundreds of millions of dollars out of public education. Now, given that, and that's aside, not even factoring in sanctuary city legislation or any of the immigration bills, but just considering that budget decision, I mean, why would Hispanic voters feel at home in the Republican Party in 2012?
Well, I think there was some arguments on the numbers, whether there was actually cuts or that we just didn't fund growth. We had meetings with all our superintendents of the districts that reside within 117, and the legislation that we supported, which was HB 400 and 500, was the agreed to legislation by those superintendents in what they wanted to achieve, knowing that these budget cuts were coming. So whether it was Dr. Folks or Dr. Stansberry, Hinojosa, just whatever district that resided, some excellent districts, or very good districts, and very poor districts, for example, South San School District, and we've had some difficulties with the Somerset Independent School District, which, depending on what map you look at, isn't in our district. But so, and we argued that with the current budget that there would be no layoffs of full-time school teachers in our district, even though there was this huge political outcry and obstruction that basically extended us into special session, and people arguing that hundreds and thousands of teachers were going to be laid off. We had 0 teachers, full-time teachers, laid off. So the reality is, whether the agency is education or any government agency, it's obvious that there's room where we can be more efficient, that we can be more productive, that we can be more successful. And the fact that it's education doesn't really take away that responsibility and accountability. We want to see dollars go more directly to the school districts. We want to see decisions made by local leadership, because who knows better for those students and their parents, their elected board members, their superintendents. We saw very little cuts in upper administration. We saw no reserves depleted, and Lord knows they have their reserves and rainy day funds as well. So again, you can grandstand any issue, but the issue is we have to find a way to fund education equally and without partiality. That's a huge responsibility for all the legislation in the upcoming session, Democrats and Republicans. But the reality is there's not going to be this continuing flow of additional monies to continue to fund government, whether it be education, human health services, we have to look at every agency very specifically, and like the accountability and the transparency that we're asked to have, and the responsibility is asked those same characters in our leadership locally in the school district. So all to say is we did what the superintendents asked us to do, is give them more control. And we are still meeting with them, and they're telling us what they need, and we are going to go and get their needs and accomplish that. Because you're right, there's nothing more important than the education of those kids, to reduce dropout rates as high as 50% in our district. But we're dealing with the issues. And I would say that wasn't done by our opponents during the session. So you can yell and you can scream and you can demand things, but to get down and roll up your sleeves and look for solutions, I think the Hispanic families, I think our constituency sees the reality of a hardworking and a reasonable leadership dealing with these issues, specifically asking them what they want done. And that's one thing we'll continue to be responsible for. So Texas as a whole, I think that was done, but I can only speak for District 117, and we made sure that we weren't going to be reactive to educational issues. We were proactive, called our superintendents in, and we are continuing talking to them on a weekly basis.
Would you have supported drawing more from the rainy day fund?
I think what we accomplished is what we needed to get done. To have an open bank account on the basis of more money rolling in and having just this open pipeline. I operate in businesses, and we have a budget. We don't have an open overage supply that if we make more profit, we can spend more money. That's a decision made by the leadership that we have in our business. So I would think that would still be the leadership of the school board, school members. But right now, it's at the state level, and until we can move that responsibility down to the local level, I think that's a leadership decision.
Okay. All right, Rolando. So what impact do you think the cuts to public education is going to have, and whether Hispanics are maybe on the fence when it comes to the Republican Party, to how they're going to approach the party next year?
Well, I don't think the decision is going to be based on the fact that cuts were made, but remember the cuts were made across the board, statewide. I think to the representative's point, the cut in funding is only one factor in this formula. We also have to look at leadership at the board level. We have to look at accountability at the teacher level. And also, parental involvement needs to also be looked at if we are to have success in this formula of trying to educate our children. I agree, it's probably the most important thing we need to be focusing on. But, I've served in 2 agencies already during the time when the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the Speaker of the House asked us to make cuts. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't easy. We had to dig deep and think hard at our budgets. But at the end of the day, the agencies are still there, and state is functioning with respect to education. People will look at that and figure out a way to make ends meet. We have our children in public schools, and we feel that they're getting a great education. In spite of the fact that we have to pitch in sometimes to buy supplies and everything, and all those small things that ultimately end up being big things. But when the Hispanic voter looks at the Republican Party in Texas, I think they'll recognize that the policies that have been in place these past few years with respect to economic development have been model policies. What we have is we have a business-friendly state where we have people coming into our state from all over the country wanting to live here, wanting to work here, companies wanting to establish their headquarters in Texas. We have certainly a lot of opportunities with the new Eagle Ford Shale situation that we have in South Texas. A lot of the things I've learned at the PUC, of all of those, I think the most important one to keep in mind is that Texas is the #1 consumer of electricity. And so we have to keep electric rates low in order to continue to attract businesses and individuals coming down here. And so, the voter's going to look, they'll look at the funding cuts, but at the same time, I think the message that sends is fiscal responsibility. And they'll know that We're operating within a budget, we're operating within a constraint that doesn't allow us to overspend. And so the fiscal responsibility component, plus adding all of the other business-friendly mechanisms that we put in place, like tort reform, I think that if they look at it as a whole, they'll know that this is the party where they need to be.
All right, you want to take a quick shot at it? And then after this, we're going to open it up for questions from the audience.
Sure, I think, one thing is Republicans, we don't win on education. So to articulate a position on it, Carl would say, we ain't going there. We lose every time on the ballot.
Marx or Rove?
Rove.
Okay.
Yeah. The second thing is, I think it's a really sad situation that when the Hispanic population is at its largest, public education is at its worst. It's almost as if it was by design. So I think that the Republicans are going to have a huge, and I hate to say it, but Governor Perry, right before he did make his run, gave the Democrats a lot of ammunition to come back and use it on him, and I think the education is going to be one of those things. So I would say don't campaign on it, don't get into it, and focus on the economics of it, and that's how you win on education.
All right, so Elaine will hand around the mic for anybody who has questions.
I know Randy Bear was quick to signal me that he has a question, so let's start there. Please, keep your hand up for the client.
Okay. Thank you guys for coming out here and for talking to us today. The one issue that Greg didn't touch on, but I'm going to have some fun with, is redistricting.
I was getting to it.
What's that?
I was getting to it.
Oh, you're getting to it? Well, I'll catch you on
Go ahead.
that. So interesting thing, we've got coming up with this, of course, as we know, the districts have been thrown into the courts, and the courts are going through their things, both the DC court and, of course, the San Antonio court. I mean, some of these districts, if you look at where the Texas House, and I mean, the distinction was drawn, some of these are so gerrymandered. I mean, Fort Worth has got a district that's 4 blocks wide in some cases just to get to a spot. Of course, we see Austin with a fractured district. It's probably the largest metro area in the nation without a single compact district. Okay, and that's the thing they've been asking for so many times. So I guess my question of this is, the way the argument's going to play out is this was against the Hispanics, from the Democrats. The Democrats are playing that out. How is that playing right now as far as in the community, in the Hispanic community that you see? Do you see that situation, or kind of what's your response regarding your district?
I guess our counterparts are always talking about money, but when it comes to lawsuits, there always seems to be plenty of it. And of course, a lot of the conservative legislation that was come forward, including redistricting, I can only speak really intelligently about Bexar County. Bexar County was a very united and a very well-working district. I think most of Texas was spun off from getting Bexar County done first, since the speaker is from here. So we were pressured to do things very quickly and very efficiently. So it's when we had 10 delegation members headed by Representative Virial, who was vice chair of redistricting, approve a map with 7 Democrats, and 3 Republicans, then my question is, why are they gerrymandering my map? And when do we get judges drawing lines for redistricting? But that's the reality, and in our office we always expect the worst, so I think I was misquoted on that, is we expected the worst. And we're not resigned to it, but we expected that it would happen. So, I mean, we won the district. When you start dividing Hispanics as being more serious or more active and less active, how do you determine that? And some of the questions that were given to me when I was deposed from Washington is they can't conceive of a Latino being conservative and holding a minority district. There's something politically incorrect about that they can't understand in Washington. And the fact is that that is very evident in the families I'm talking to every day. Young families purchasing homes, and we do have conservative values, and I think the Republican Party speaks well to many of our issues, where being a Democrat, formerly, I left the Democrat Party because they could not speak in support of the things that were important to me and my family and me as a businessman. So I can tell you that's why I separated, and Art on our staff is a historian, and specifically to the Tejano history. But we presuppose that all these inner city Hispanics are the true Hispanics, when in reality is we have 7th and 8th generation Texans that were here before we were even formed a state. So how do you suppose that one type of Latino or Hispanic is more real than another? And that's what the court is arguing. So to me, it's more foolishness from Washington and more mandates from our federal government on what we're trying to achieve in the state. And in our district, it was a natural progression of depopulation of the inner city area and the growth in the outer areas that really dictated the type of map that we needed to achieve. Is we had to get out of the way for Farias, get out of the way for Menendez, get out of the way for Castro, because there were only 3 districts that had population growth, which was my district, over 50,000, Lyle Larson's, I think, over 90, and the Speaker, 25 or 30,000.
Ask you to just describe your district for us. I mean, where it is in Bexar County, and also how the map changed in redistricting.
From 08 to 010 to back.
Yeah, I mean, like what
we'll find out tomorrow what it is.
Right, yeah, no. I mean, tell us how tell us about just quickly how the map changed in the legislature, and now with the new court order map, how it's changed.
Well, the original district pretty much was outside 1604, from Helotes, Gray Forest, all the way down to I-35 Von Army, Lytle area. We pretty much came into the city around Lackland, 410, Valley High. So I had Port San Antonio, Lackland Air Force Base. And it came in University of Texas at San Antonio, and I think had Valero and some of the neighborhoods inside Bandera up to Babcock to I-10. Our map pretty much gave up everything inside 1604. Pretty much from Gray Forest down to Highway 90. So we kept parts of Valley High, Lackland Air Force Base, and we became more rural. So we became probably the biggest geographical district and the most rural. So we thought that was consistent in that you have about 10% of our population is rural, and actually one district that would be majority rural, where the other 9 were anchored in the city pretty staunchly throughout the other 9 districts. So we felt that was consistent with the Constitution and voter rights. Now how it's been gerrymandered is one judge left it the same, the other 2 pretty much spin it back to what it was. I mean, there's some differences, but it basically goes back to the 2008,
Did you
2000.
consider it a safer district for you when it was more rural?
Being rural was more conservative.
No. Did you lose a lot of Hispanic voters in making it?
No, we actually achieved an increase. And that's why I questioned the questions on the type of Hispanics we had in the new district. They were less active than the ones inside the city. Okay. There's some common sense to make sense.
Okay, great. All right.
Hello, my name is David. I'm 18 years old, just graduated from high school, and I participated in my first election. Vote. I voted on November the 8th, so I'm proud about that. And my question is, I've been homeschooled, attended private Catholic school, and been in the public school system. And concerning education, what area can we help maybe families who don't want to send their children to public schools? How can a family who is paying for their taxes to fund the public school, on top of tuition, how can we help them out, getting their children to the education that they want or that they can get?
Yeah.
I guess probably one of the positive things about a lot of the legislation that was introduced by the Republican Party speaks to the ability of families to send their children to private schools. In fact, some of our more unpopular legislation was the UIL, that kids that go to parochial schools or private schools or home schools would be able to compete on all levels of UIL competition, without having to pay additional monies. Those are currently closed to whoever they deem not able to participate. There also was some great legislation that, if the schools are too crowded and our average funding per student is $6,500, give the parents $3,500. You make $3,000, not having the student there that you can push into other areas of the budget that need shoring up. But again, with your special interest groups, your unions, and different stakeholders in education won't consider that. So those are types of legislation that kind of even the field, allow pressure of growth off districts, but are not being considered on the floor because of special interest and the stakeholders in public education. And let me tell you, they're a strong group. So there is ideas, there's great ideas, nothing new is under the sun. There's some very practical, legislation out there, but because it is political, we don't see the light of the day outside of committees and onto the floor to be debated when they should be, and you're right. And those are things that we're committed to continue to push forward, is giving parents choices as well. And choices in education, I think, are key.
This week, the U.S. Council of Catholic Bishops are meeting in Washington, and they've kind of laid out a new front in American politics over an issue they're titling religious liberties. I believe the state of Illinois has recently defunded Catholic charities completely because of their failure to offer abortion services to immigrants. And I think so for the very first time, we see the Catholic Church reacting against Democrat/secular policies as they creep into some of their other areas of social justice that traditionally have been left alone. And again, since this forum is about Hispanic conservatives, obviously for the Republican Party, especially in Texas, to grow, it's going to have to grow within a Hispanic culture that's largely Catholic. Do you guys make any comment on how you see the religious liberty debate, even though it's in its infancy, lining up in 2012, and whether or not you think that'll, even though the hierarchy of the church may be making a strong stance, how will that trickle down to the pips, the people in the pews?
I'm not completely aware of it, but you mentioned it earlier, and I can only add to, I think, some of the optics to that. One is, I think, in the upper hierarchy of the Catholic Church, it is conservative, and what I've often noticed is there are a lot of alignments between the Republican Party and working the Catholic churches. And I think on those conservative stances, especially on the pro-life, those will continue to, that aspect of the relationship between the Republicans and the Catholics will continue to grow. And I think it'll probably begin to outweigh the other half of the Catholic Church, which is the social justice side, which would be against the immigration and the voter ID and all of these other burdens. And that's going to be a challenge, but it's good to see that the church is becoming more engaged politically. The most important thing I learned during my time in the White House, and this is something Mike Berlanga also says, you've got to remember that the hierarchy is God, people, Constitution, country, okay? And then you've got to ask yourself the question, why is government replacing our religion in a secular world, okay? In the end, the end game, whether you're religious or political, is the same. And it is that new world order, okay? And you hear your politicians talk about it, and it's biblical too, okay? The goal is always been the same. Nothing's different. It's all the same. It's just a new epoch, a new generation of individuals playing out the same roles that we've played out lifetime after lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, okay? And that end goal is to remove Christ from this earth. That's it. The government will try to confuse you, make it seem like religious and governments need to be separate. But I will tell you what I've learned is that that's the end plan. And to replace religion with government. And if you look at your symbols in government, you look awfully religious these days. So this all plays into these things that I realized men way above me have knowledge of, as well as the church. And I do think this is that period, as you can see reading the headlines in the news, that the, pardon my French, shit is beginning to hit the fan. And so the religious communities will mobilize really effectively, and I think the Catholics will do the same. The Mormons are out there with their candidate. So there's a big converging point on all of these items in this moment in time.
So I think we probably got like our next 6 forums just on that. So we're not going to dwell too much on it. We've got one last question. We're going to give it 2. Okay. Tom Marks.
Yeah.
Let's hear it.
Another Rolf actually talked about how President Bush sort of opened up the door to Hispanics moving from kind of liberal to a swing voter. With that, I think there was a large portion of the Republican Party that some of them were totally desensitized and just said, yeah, that's fine, throw the doors open. A lot of them didn't kind of know how to deal with it. And so you sort of saw the window dressing, the rise of the window dressing candidate, where that's a Hispanic district, so we need to put, someone with a Hispanic last name there, and then, like Representative Garza talked about, just sort of forget about them because we're not really interested. But, with that, how long do you think it'll be until we'll see, someone with a Hispanic surname where it's not really going to be, well, that's just the minority district, so let's run a minority there, and, you'll see someone with a Hispanic surname able to win and garner a large percentage of the vote in maybe the 5th Congressional District of Tennessee.
And that's already happening in congressional districts. You've got Jamie Lynn Herrera, something else, out of Washington State. Right. You've got Raul Labrador in Idaho, Puerto Rican. Bill Flores, Middle Texas. I think that's more apt to happen on the Republican ranks, to have Hispanics represent everybody. The Hispanic in that position faces a lot of criticism, and there's a term going around called Lino. They're only Latino in name only. Meaning they've kind of forsaken their culture and those things that the Democrat Hispanics say, no, this is what a Hispanic says, but this gets exactly to State Rep Garza's point. Who's to define what that is? And I think that's what the conservative Republican movement is about. And there are, at the national level, 3-4 big players. Marco Rubio, Susana Martinez, Brian Sandoval, and Luis Fortunio. That is what they're dealing with, is how do they represent the knowledge of where they know their community needs to get to be politically involved and politically empowered, and representing the Republican Party. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did. Do you see it as a drawback as far as, they happen to be a Latino in a non-Latino area? Well, no, for them personally, because, with that label, of course, comes, that's people get a mindset about who they are based upon that. Yeah. So, if there is some sort of mess up or, something wrong that they do, is that going to be bad for the entire Latino community, or is it, can that actually just kind of be,
No, I think it opens it up to this idea that there is another breed of Hispanic out there politically, and that is a conservative Republican. And I don't think the challenge is with that person. They're the ones who are going to have to weigh what they know internally versus the party line. And that's on both sides of the spectrum. That's on the Democrat side and the Republican side. There are what's known as establishment Republicans and establishment Democrats. I've had the opportunity to be an established Republican. I'm not anymore. Rolando right now is a great established Republican, okay? And hopefully his candidate will go on and see it, and he will be an agent of change. But once you're in and out, the dissatisfaction that you see on the right and the left, and why you have Hispanics who will swing and vote Democrat sometime and then come back and vote Republican when you have someone like Bush talk, is they're weighing that out within themselves. And I think they look more at the candidates than the strict party line. And if you're not born into that structure, you ain't in it. No matter how much you think you're in it, you're not. You know?
Thanks a lot. All right, Gilbert.
You know, anyone wants to take this, it's fine. I remember a while back talking with Elaine who was talking about his first experience working with John Tower in 1978 on his Senate campaign, and how at that time the feeling was if a Republican candidate got like 10% of the Hispanic vote, that was considered doing pretty well. That was kind of like the benchmark. And I just wonder if any of you have a sense, what was the failure to connect? What was happening or not happening as far as Republicans? You know, because there's a famous Reagan line about Hispanics are Republicans, they just don't know it yet. What was happening so that connection was not being made at that time?
Rolando, you want to take that?
Well, I think back then we had just a handful of Hispanic Republicans who were able to carry the message back to the community. And now I think there are more of us, and hopefully we'll be able to carry that message through more, I guess, deeply and in a more concise manner. You know, Lionel has a long history in Republican politics, all the way from the John Tower days. But you know, the more I go outside of San Antonio and outside of Texas, the more I recognize that there are hundreds, maybe even thousands of true conservative Hispanics out there carrying their message that you know, will allow the candidates to connect with the community. You know, I've had to bring Governor Perry to the West Side. You know, there's never really been anyone to bring him to the West Side, and we've had great events on the West Side with him. You know, part of the problem also tends to be that when we have, especially national level candidates come to town, we tend to host them at country clubs and other arenas that aren't necessarily part of the community at large. And so, you know, that happened to Senator McCain versus Obama. You know, Senator Obama came to the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center while Senator McCain was having his event at the San Antonio Country Club. That doesn't allow the candidate to really touch base with the grassroots, with the community. And so what we've had to do is act as a bridge to our community so that we can expose that candidate to the community and vice versa. And so now I think there are many more of us out there who have the ability to connect the candidate with the community, and hopefully there'll be more of us out there who can continue that trend. You know, just recently the San Antonio Hispanic Chamber had Lindsey Graham in San Antonio. I mean, he was amazed. Lindsey Graham in front of 500-600 Hispanic business people. He's never seen that. You know, Mitch McConnell, same thing. So again, we need to act as bridges, to the Republican Party, from the Republican Party to our community. And as long as we can continue to do that, we will get there, and get to the point where Lionel was talking about, being able to expose the candidate to the community and expose the community to the candidate.
All right, great. Well, I think I'm going to call it a day with that. And I want to thank the panelists for graciously agreeing to appear. We really appreciate it. And thanks for coming out. I also want to encourage you, again, if you're not subscribers, we can get you set up. So let's take care of that now. And thank you.